COVID-19 vaccination resumes today with medical students as a priority. Now, this comes after students are eagerly waiting to go back to school generally. We have the story in our bulletin today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nahabe Kajura, but first, at the headlines. Works on Nachivubo Stadium are progressing well, no need to panic. Egypt moves Pharaoh's solar boat to new mega museum. And in our sports today, defending champions KCCA ejected out of Sekafa Kagame. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And Africa Today starts with one of our top stories. Now, the government has announced that COVID-19 vaccination will resume today, and that medical students will be prioritized in this third rollout of vaccines to allow the reopening of medical schools. Now, the country has so far vaccinated more than 1.1 million people against the target of vaccinating at least 21.9 million people to safely reopen the economy. We have more on this report.
The resumption of vaccination comes more than a week after the government received additional donations of 586,080 doses of COVID-19 vaccines. The jabs comprised 300,000 doses of Sinovac from the Chinese government and 286,080 doses of AstraZeneca from Global Sharing Initiative COVAX. The vaccination exercise was halted last month after the 175,200 doses of AstraZeneca that the French government had donated to the country was exhausted within few days amid a large number of people who are due for the second dose. The huge demand for COVID-19 vaccines is being attributed to increasing numbers of deaths, and people get sensitized about the importance of embracing the vaccination. According to a notice from the Ministry of Health yesterday, in the vaccination exercise that will resume today, Kampala will have 32 vaccination points to allow for easy access to vaccines. Of this, Nakawa Division and Lubaga Division will each have 8 vaccination points, Central Division and Machinde will each have 5 vaccination sites, while Kawempe will have 6 vaccination points.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now moving on, last week the debate on the redevelopment of Nachivubo War Memorial Stadium reappeared in the media arena after some politicians accused Hamisi Chigundu, the director of Ham Enterprises Limited, for failure to complete the stadium in time. Now this prompted members of parliament headed by the Bujiri Municipality MP Asman Basalira to go and inspect the progress of the stadium. We have more on this report.
The plans to redevelop this stadium started in 2013 when the government, through a public-private partnership, entered into contractual obligation with Ham Enterprises. Considering the tactical and strategic approach, government thought it wise with the developer to first construct the perimeter wall and shops that began operation in 2017. In 2017, an extra 5 years were added to Ham Chigundu as the developer to construct a 30,000-seater stadium. The construction of the facility had stalled due to politics, court battles and compensation of vendors. Politicians who undermined the capacity of the developer and court orders blocking the construction affected the progress of this stadium at some point. There was also a setback on construction speed due to COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the country's economy since most workers couldn't access the stadium, hence a suspension of works for over 6 months. When the first lockdown was lifted, the developer had to reentrench some workers in order to fit within the standard operating procedures that had been put in place. According to Hamis Chigundu, the public should not panic because all the employees are back and the construction is going on steadily.
Moving on, the government has cleared at least 76 city arcades to reopen, while 70 arcades will remain closed until they meet the standard operating procedures. Now, the revelation is contained in a press statement which was issued by Kampala Minister Mensa Kabanda on August 7th. We have more on this report.
The Minister for Kampala, Mensa Kabanda, noted that of the 178 arcades, only 106 have so far been inspected, of which 76 arcades have been recommended for reopening, while 7 arcades have not yet met the requirements for reopening. She also stated that the inspection teams on Saturday closed Gazaland and Cornerstone arcades for denying access to the teams. Ms. Kabanda wrote that some arcades had reopened without fulfilling compliance requirements set out and are continuing with the enforcement exercise and shall not hesitate to prosecute anyone violating the standard operating procedures. Some of the requirements for reopening include presence of compliance officers at all entrances of arcades, free corridors and accessways, observance of proper hygiene and sanitation, adequate lighting and ventilation.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now let's go for a quick break. We shall come back with the international news. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. In our international news today, the Rwandan military says its forces and Mozambican troops have retaken Mosiboa de Prey, a key port city from Islamist militants in northern Mozambique. Now, Mosiboa de Prey, located in Cabo Delgado province, was the rebels' last stronghold and home to one of Africa's biggest gas fields. We have more on this report.
The Mozambican armed force, which has been struggling to regain control of the province, has been reluctant to seek foreign military help, but has now accepted help from its neighbors. Rwanda last month sent 1,000 soldiers to Mozambique to fight the militants who launched an insurgency in 2017. The Southern African Regional Bloc SADC is sending in hundreds of troops, while former colonial power Portugal is on the ground instructing soldiers. The forces last week claimed their first success since being deployed, saying they had hoped the Mozambique army regain control of Awase, a small but also strategic settlement near Mocimboa da Praia. More than 3,000 people have been killed and 820,000 displaced during the conflict.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now moving on, the boat, which dates back some 4,500 years, was discovered in 1954 at the southern corner of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of the three Giza pyramids. We have more on this report.
The boat, which is 42 meters long and weighs 20 tons, was transferred on a smart vehicle, a 10-hour trip that began late on Friday, according to a report by the state-run MENA news agency. The ministry said that the transportation aimed to protect and preserve the biggest and oldest organic artifact made of wood in the history of humanity for future generations. It will be displayed at Grand Egyptian Museum, along with tens of thousands of artifacts, including the famed Mosque of Tutankhamen and other treasures currently housed in the century-old building in Cairo's congested Tahrir Square. The transportation came 4 months after Egyptian authorities held a gala parade celebrating the transfer of 22 of the country's prized pharaonic royal mummies from the Egyptian Museum at the heart of Cairo to their new resting place in a massive new museum, the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, farther south in the capital. The events are part of the Egypt's effort to attract foreign tourists by publicizing its ancient artifacts.
Well, thank you so much, our reporter. Now moving on, deadly fighting erupted on Saturday between rival factions of South Sudan Vice President Riek Machar's SPLA-IO, according to his military spokesman in a statement. Now, the clashes erupted after Machar's rivals declared this week they had disposed him as the head of the party and its military forces.
Armed forces led by a rival general in the party, Simon Gatwech Duo, had launched an attack on Machar's men who had repulsed the aggressors, the spokesman Colonel Paul Gabriel said. Machar's Sudanese People Liberation Army forces had killed 2 major generals and over 27 enemy soldiers, while they had lost 3 men. The fighting could not be independently confirmed, and there was no immediate response from Gatwech Duo's side. Leaders of the military wing of Machar's SPLM said on Wednesday that they had deposed the rebel-turned politician for failing to represent their interests. The fighting could put pressure on the fragile 2018 power-sharing deal between Machar and his old foe President Salva Kiir. Machar's allies on Friday dismissed his ouster as failed coup, insisting he was still in full control of the party.
Well, thank you so much, our reporter. Now moving on, 2 months after the eruption of the Democratic Republic of Congo's Nyiragongo volcano that affected the city of Goma and its surroundings, an earthquake of magnitude 4 on the Richter scale was felt again on Thursday. Now, the recent tremor has caused panic among the residents of Goma, who are still recovering from the recent incident. Take a look at the story.
Goma has recorded more than 100 tremors in recent months, though the intensity of the magnitude has exponentially decreased over time. According to the volcanologists, the earthquakes were caused by the tectonic plates seeking to recover their equilibrium after the recent eruptions. On the evening of the same Thursday, the Goma Volcanological Observatory reassured people and called for calm before specifying that the tremor felt in the town had no connection with the activity of the Nzirangong and the Nzamuragira volcanoes. Honore Shirabara, a researcher at the OVG, said that they are following the situation very closely, which is why they had reassured the population that this was an earthquake that is tectonic and not of volcanic origin. Last May, at least 32 people died during and after the flow of lava from the Nyiragongo volcano that devastated localities north of the city of Goma in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. More questions are still being raised on the preparedness and ability to relay early warnings before another incident occurs.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now let's go for a quick break. We shall come back with the business news. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. In our business news today, Ivory Coast and Ghana, the world's two largest cocoa suppliers, last week agreed to better cooperate on pricing and combating child labor in the country. Now, Ivory Coast accounts for more than 40% of the world output, and Ghana at least 20%. Now, more than half of their growers live below the poverty line. We have more.
The two West Africa cocoa producers joined forces in 2019 to try to get more from the chocolate industry, obtaining a premium per ton of cocoa. But the coronavirus pandemic has hit global demand, and buyers are reluctant to see prices rise with a surplus in supplies. Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister Shirley Ayoko Bochwe said they had agreed to form a joint body to cooperate over research, price setting, and child labor. The world's chocolate market is estimated to be worth more than $100 billion, concentrated in a few multinational corporations. Experts in Ivory Coast say that cocoa prices are still low, even with the so-called living income differential or LID supplement. The two countries negotiated with chocolate makers to help farmers. More than half of the million people working in the sector live below the poverty line, earning less than $1.2 per day, according to the World Bank.
Thank you so much, reporter. Away from business, in our health news today, South Africa's health authorities have started vaccinating the homeless, one of the country's most vulnerable communities, with one-dose vaccines to ensure full protection against the coronavirus. We have more.
It's estimated that around 200,000 people live on South Africa's street, which is a vulnerable community that has been hit extra hard by the COVID-19 pandemic due to the harsh outdoor environment and a higher rate of pre-existing medical conditions. Reverend Annie Kirk, director of the Hope Exchange, a non-government organization that provides services to street people, said that it has been a very tough time, especially in the winter for the homeless people who are very susceptible to floods and colds. The Western Cape government says it will prioritize the use of the single-dose Johnson & Johnson jabs in its drive to vaccinate people living in remote, homeless, and rural communities. Norma French Mbombo, the health minister of Western Cape, said that they are using J&J for the homeless because it's one dose. The homeless people in South Africa who want to be vaccinated will be able to sign up, whether or not they have formal identity documents, and then will be entered in South Africa's electronic vaccine data system.
In our sports news today, Kampala Capital City Authority Football Club for the second time has lost in the 2021 Sekafa Kagame Cup to bow out of the competition ongoing in Tanzania's coastal city of Dar es Salaam. Messenger Ngozi Eric Mbirizi was the hero with the lone goal of the match coming in the 35th minute. We have more on this report.
The 13th-time Uganda Premier League champions lost 1-0 to Burundi's reigning league winners, Mesaga Ngozi, at the Benjamin Park National Stadium during a floodlit Group B contest. There were no further goals in the match, and the result implied that KCCA completed their Group B matches with just a single victory and a goal in 3 games. Mesaga Ngozi finished with 4 points off 3 matches. KMKM beat already qualified Azam 3-2 at the Azam Sports Complex in Chamazi to also make the semi-final grade alongside Azam. Despite the result, Azam had already made the semi-final grade with back-to-back victories over KCCA and the KMKM. Meanwhile, Express qualified for the semi-final after a 3-1 comprehensive win against Young Africans in the earlier game played at the Benjamin Parker National Stadium. Guests Nyasa Big Bullets recorded a 2-0 win over South Sudanese Atalabara to join Express in the semi-finals. With the Sunday and Monday, the designated days for resting, the semi-finals will be played on Tuesday and Wednesday ahead of Saturday's grand finale. Katendi Chawasinga reporting for TV Africa.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now, before we end our bulletin, let's have a recap of our top stories. Works on Nachivubo Stadium are progressing well, no need to panic. Egypt moves Pharaoh's solar boat to new mega museum. And in our sports today, defending champions KCCA ejected out of Sekafa Kagame. Thank you so much for joining us from where we started from. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We shall keep updating you. It is TV Africa, the right to know.